The fluorescent lights hummed faintly in the shelter's backroom, casting a sterile glow over rows of kennels. The air was thick with the scent of disinfectant, damp fur, and something more difficult to name, resignation. Most of the dogs stirred as the workers passed, tails wagging in cautious hope. But in the farthest kennel, tucked into the shadows, a lone figure lay still. Shadow. The name was ironic. He wasn't invisible. If anything, he stood out among the shelter's usual rescues. He was large, almost unnaturally so, with a powerful frame that suggested wolfish ancestry. His short black coat gleamed under the artificial light, every muscle taut beneath the surface. But it was his eyes that unsettled people most. They weren't the soft, pleading eyes of a dog seeking love. They were sharp, assessing, calculating, watching. People came and went, cooing at the puppies, picking the golden retrievers, the fluffy lapdogs, the eager-to-please mutts. Occasionally, someone's gaze would drift to Shadow's kennel, curiosity flickering in their expression. Then they'd notice the sign attached to his enclosure. Adopt with caution, history unknown, has been returned multiple times. That was enough. Their interest turned to unease, and they moved on. At least, most did. Today, a man stood before Shadow's kennel, his gaze steady. He didn't fidget, didn't recoil, didn't make the mistake of leaning too close to the bars. He simply stood, hands in the pockets of a weathered leather jacket, his expression unreadable. "Are you sure?" asked a shelter worker, a woman named Beth, who had grown attached to Shadow in her own wary way. "He's not easy." Daniel lifted his eyes from the dog, his face lined with something that wasn't quite weariness but carried its weight. "I'm sure." Beth hesitated. "You've read the reports, right?" Daniel gave a slow nod. He had. Shadow had been adopted 3 times. The first time, he'd bolted the moment he was taken home, disappearing into the woods for 3 days before being found watching the adoptive family's house from a distance, refusing to come inside. The second time, he had tolerated his new owner for a week before, seemingly without reason, shredding an expensive couch and standing stiffly by the front door, staring at nothing for hours. The third attempt had ended the worst. Shadow had lunged at a man who had tried to remove his collar. No bite, no contact, but the intent had been enough. The dog had been returned that same night, the man swearing there was something wrong with him. Beth exhaled, lowering her voice. "If you want a companion, there are easier choices, friendlier ones." Daniel crouched slightly, studying Shadow through the bars. The dog did not growl, did not retreat, did not even blink. He just watched, evaluating. "Has anyone ever considered that he might not be here by mistake?" Daniel murmured. Beth frowned. "What do you mean?" Daniel straightened. "I mean, look at him. He's not lost. He's waiting." Beth opened her mouth, then closed it. She didn't have an answer for that. The adoption process was quicker than expected. When Daniel signed the final paperwork, Beth hesitated once more. "One condition," she said, biting her lip. "Nobody's ever taken off his collar. He won't let them. We don't know why, but—" Daniel lifted a brow. "You want me to leave it on?" "I want you to be careful," she corrected. He glanced at the thick, scuffed leather around Shadow's neck. A strange choice for a shelter dog. Most wore standard-issue nylon tags. This one looked personal, worn from time, not from shelter life. He filed that thought away for later. Shadow didn't resist when the kennel door swung open. He didn't bolt, didn't cower, didn't wag his tail. He simply stood, as if he'd known all along this moment would come. The leash went slack in Daniel's grip as they walked out of the shelter together. The other dogs barked and whined, pawing at their enclosures, but Shadow moved in silence. Beth watched them go, rubbing her arms against an unexplained chill. Something about the sight unsettled her, not in a bad way, but in a way she couldn't quite put words to. The dog no one wanted, the man who had come for him without hesitation. Beth had worked in shelters for nearly a decade. She had seen abandoned pets blossom under gentle care. She had seen frightened dogs warm up to kind hands. She had seen second chances, heartbreak, joy. But she had never seen this. Shadow hadn't found a home today. He had found something else. The drive home was silent. Daniel kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the gearshift, his fingers occasionally tapping in thought. Shadow sat in the back seat, motionless except for the slow, steady rise and fall of his chest. He neither panted nor whined, nor did he press his nose against the window like most dogs might. Instead, he sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead, as if he knew exactly where they were going. Daniel glanced at the rear-view mirror. Shadow's amber eyes met his. Not a dog's usual look of curiosity or excitement. Something else. Something sharper. The road stretched long into the night, the hum of tires against asphalt the only sound between them. It was nearly an hour before Daniel turned onto the long gravel driveway that led to his house, a modest, secluded property surrounded by thick woods. He preferred it that way. As he pulled up, Shadow shifted for the first time since they'd left the shelter. His ears pricked slightly. His body tensed. Daniel shut off the engine and opened his door. "Come on." Shadow stepped out without hesitation. No sniffing, no circling, just a single, methodical scan of his surroundings before his body relaxed fractionally. Daniel frowned. Most dogs hesitated in a new environment. They tested the ground, took in the smells, sought reassurance. Not Shadow. Daniel led him inside, tossing his keys onto the kitchen counter. Shadow followed, his nails clicking lightly against the hardwood floor. "Make yourself at home," Daniel muttered, setting down a bowl of water. He didn't expect much enthusiasm, and he didn't get any. Shadow approached the bowl, sniffed it once, and then walked away. Daniel watched as the dog moved through the house with purpose, his steps smooth, controlled. He didn't jump onto furniture. He didn't sniff around. Instead, he made a slow, deliberate circuit of each room, pausing briefly in doorways before continuing. It wasn't curiosity. It was a sweep. Daniel exhaled. "Who the hell are you?" Shadow didn't react. He simply finished his self-appointed perimeter check and then, without a sound, lay down facing the front door. Like a sentry, something cold prickled at the back of Daniel's neck. Maybe Beth had been right. Maybe Shadow wasn't lost. Maybe he was waiting. The first clue. Days passed. Shadow never barked. He never whined. He never sought attention. He followed Daniel at a careful distance, always aware, always watching. One night, Daniel sat on the couch, scrolling through old military contacts on his phone, absently sipping a beer. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, just an itch in the back of his mind that refused to go away. A noise broke his focus. A sharp, low click. Shadow stood at the sliding glass door, his body rigid. His head was tilted slightly, ears forward, staring into the darkness outside. Daniel set his drink down, heart picking up speed. "What is it?" No reaction. Shadow remained locked on whatever was out there, completely still. Daniel's muscles tensed. He crossed the room in 2 steps and flipped off the light, allowing the outside night to become clearer through the glass. Nothing, just trees swaying in the wind. And yet Shadow didn't move. Then, so fast Daniel almost missed it, Shadow's eyes flicked upward. Daniel followed the motion. His blood ran cold. There, high in the tree-line, a faint, red pinpoint of light. Gone in an instant. A scope. Someone had been watching them. Daniel's training took over. He dropped low, reaching for the firearm beneath the table. But as soon as the red light disappeared, Shadow relaxed. His tail remained still, his body loose, but his eyes tracked the woods for minutes after. No panic, no growl, just patience, as if he expected it. Daniel remained crouched, his breathing steady, fingers tight around cold metal. He waited 5 minutes, then 10. The air outside remained still. Finally, Shadow exhaled, turned from the door, and walked back to his spot by the couch. And just like that, he closed his eyes. Daniel slowly lowered his gun, pulse still hammering. "All right," he murmured to the dog. "We need to talk." Shadow didn't move. Daniel leaned forward, his voice steady. "Who were you before the shelter?" Silence. Then, slowly, Shadow opened his eyes. And for the first time, Daniel wasn't sure he was looking at a dog at all. The next morning, Daniel took a different approach. He brewed his coffee, sat at the table, and watched Shadow as the dog lay by the door. The night's events had only deepened his suspicion. Shadow wasn't just any stray. This dog had seen things. Daniel had spent years working in intelligence, and he knew how to recognize controlled behavior. Shadow didn't act like a lost pet. He acted like someone trained, and more importantly, someone who had a mission. "All right," Daniel muttered, taking a slow sip of coffee. "Let's see what you're hiding." Shadow didn't move, but Daniel could feel the weight of his presence. He went to the garage, rummaged through an old storage trunk, and pulled out a signal detector, a handheld device used to sweep for hidden transmitters. If someone had been watching them, they weren't doing it blindly. Daniel powered it on and scanned the house. The detector buzzed softly, green light steady. Clear. Then he turned it towards Shadow's collar. The device beeped. Daniel froze. He moved the scanner away. The beeping stopped. He moved it back. Beep, beep, beep. His grip tightened. Beth had warned him not to remove the collar. Now he knew why. He knelt beside Shadow, who was watching him with quiet intensity. Slowly, carefully, Daniel reached for the thick leather strap around the dog's neck. The second his fingers brushed the buckle, Shadow growled. Not a warning. Not fear. Something deeper. Daniel met his gaze. "If I take this off, what happens?" Shadow didn't move. But Daniel had made his choice. With steady hands, he undid the buckle. The collar slipped free. For the first time since bringing him home, Shadow shuddered, like a weight had just been lifted. Daniel turned the collar over. Inside, embedded in the thick leather, was a tiny, metallic chip, a tracking device. Someone had been following Shadow. Someone had let him be adopted on purpose. A rush of adrenaline surged through Daniel's veins. His instinct screamed trap. Before he could react, Shadow's ears snapped up. His body tensed. Then, the front door handle turned. Daniel moved fast. He yanked his gun from the holster, stepping into position, heart pounding. The door burst open. Two men in black tactical gear stormed in, weapons raised. Shadow lunged. The first man didn't even get a shot off before Shadow's teeth sank into his forearm, dragging him down with terrifying precision. Daniel fired. One shot. Two. The second man dropped. The one beneath Shadow screamed, trying to fight back, but Shadow held firm, his grip calculated, his movements flawless. Not an attack out of fear. A trained takedown. Daniel stepped forward, gun aimed. "Who sent you?" The man gritted his teeth, pain lacing his voice. "You have no idea what you just did." Daniel's mind raced. The tracker, the red light, the silent patience Shadow had carried since the moment they met. Shadow wasn't lost. He was running. And now, so was Daniel. The man on the floor struggled, his breath ragged, but Shadow didn't let go. His teeth remained locked around the intruder's arm, pinning him like a vice. Daniel took a measured step forward, keeping his gun steady. "Start talking. Who sent you?" The man gave a humorless chuckle, despite the pain. "You think this ends here?" His eyes flicked toward Shadow. "You have no clue what that thing really is." Daniel exchanged a glance with Shadow. "Thing, not dog." Before he could press further, the man's jaw tensed. Then a quick, sharp shudder. Daniel lunged, but it was too late. The man's body spasmed once, his pupils dilating as foam bubbled at the corners of his mouth. A faint, acrid scent filled the air. Cyanide. Shadow released him immediately and stepped back, his breath steady. His amber eyes locked onto Daniel's, waiting. A professional hit. Clean. Precise. Whoever wanted Shadow alive had also ensured that no loose ends remained if things went wrong. Daniel exhaled sharply and turned to the second man. Dead. A bullet between the ribs. No way to get more answers. Outside, the wind howled. The trees swayed in the cold dawn light, but the world felt eerily still. Too still. Daniel knew what came next. The men were scouts, an opening move. More were coming. He turned back to Shadow. The dog stood there, poised, waiting for his next command. Not fearful, not uncertain, just ready. Daniel clenched his jaw. "We need to go. Now." Shadow didn't hesitate. Hashtag the escape. 15 minutes later, Daniel drove fast, his truck tearing down back roads away from his home. Shadow sat in the passenger seat, head low, body still. The tracker was gone, but Daniel knew that wouldn't slow them down for long. Whoever was after Shadow, whoever had trained him, would already be recalibrating their search. He had one chance to stay ahead. Pulling out his phone, he scrolled through contacts until he found the one name he needed. A former intelligence operative. Someone who owed him a favor. The call barely rang before a voice answered. "Talk. I need a location scrub," Daniel said, voice tight. "And I need to know who's running black ops on canine units." A pause. Then a low whistle. "You just stepped into something nasty, didn't you?" Daniel's grip tightened on the wheel. "How deep?" Another pause. "Deep enough that if you're calling me, you already know you can't run forever." Daniel glanced at Shadow. "I don't need forever. I just need answers." The voice on the other end sighed. "All right, sending you coordinates." "And Daniel?" "What?" A beat of silence. Then, "You better pray that dog is on your side." The call ended. Daniel checked his phone. A set of numbers appeared. A meeting point. He looked at Shadow, exhaling slowly. "Let's end this." Shadow didn't blink, but in the silence of the truck, his tail thumped once against the seat. Daniel wasn't sure what that meant, but he drove faster.